But here I am. And I love what I do. You had a question?
No, I was just going to point out that also in Genesis 7, verses 2, 3, and 4, he talks about putting on extra animals for food.
Yeah, okay.
The clean animals.
He does talk about putting on 7 pair of the clean. And I might argue a little bit with you that those were for food, but rather for sacrifice. Think about that for just a moment. Why would they be considered clean? What was the whole deal? Well, we know that part of the way that they did things back then was through sacrificing. What was the first thing that Noah did when he got off the boat? He built a... There you go. So I think some of those probably were used for sacrifice. Good point. Other comments? Yeah?
Sometimes it's hard to picture dinosaurs on the ark because we always see them as man-eaters,
Yes.
man-killers. How do we know the disposition of a dinosaur?
How do we know the disposition?
Yeah, how do they act?
The same way we know the disposition of bears, tigers, cows, etc. And by that I mean, God has put us as dominion holders over everything, correct? Have we been able to train bears in the circus?
No.
Somebody said no? We got bears that will walk on balls. We got tigers that will jump through flaming hoops. Even though they are still considered very dangerous creatures, and they are, I mean, let's be honest. You got people that are riding Shamu, and we know like last year and a half ago, Shamu decided he was hungry. But the point being, we still have the ability to be over all of God's creation. Do we know the actual disposition? The answer, bottom line, is no. Because fossils do not tell you anything about what's going on up here. In all honesty, you don't know what a fossil can tell you? Creature died. That's it. Everything after that is basically speculation or what we're having to piece together.
Could you possibly say a word or two about all the continents being fit together?
Yeah, absolutely. The concept that he's talking about is Pangea. It's not the bread company. The kids in here know what I'm talking about because it's in their textbooks. Concept is that there was a time where everything was close together. Now, let me state right up front, we don't know for sure one way or another, and it's not going to affect my faith one way or another if it was or if it wasn't. Here's the problem I have with it. They're showing our kids textbook pages where you've got South America here, Africa here, they show them as a good fit, and then they'll say something to the effect of they're moving apart at a rate of 33 millimeters per year. So then they extrapolate the distance and they say, therefore it took so many hundreds of thousands of years for them to separate. What is their assumption? Always separating at that 33 millimeters per year. Is it possible that God in His fury ripped them apart at the flood? On that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up. Or is it even possible that they weren't together to begin with? You see, they are basing it on uniformity. And I think that is a very, very unscientific way to look at it. Good question. Yeah?
How do we know from the fossils that the dinosaurs were actually reptiles?
How do we know from the fossils that they were actually reptiles? Believe it or not, we've got more than just bones at this stage. And by that, we've actually now been able to collect dinosaur skin, which is very unusual because you normally don't get soft tissue. We have got dinosaur embryos. We have got some things where they've been able to actually take and use MRI technology and look inside either the eggs or the bones themselves to get a better feel for what everything is. So bottom line, you've got scaled creatures, we know from the fossil record, that gave birth in eggs, and that we are really, really pretty sure that they were cold-blooded. And when you add all that up, what do you get? You got characteristics of a reptile. Let's see. Many evolutionists believe that macroevolution is proof of evolution. What is this change? Is it adaptation or a dormant gene or something else? So macroevolution, the concept of going from one species to the next. I had a guy one time arguing with me, and I did something I normally don't ever do as a public speaker. I had a handheld mic, and I handed it to him. I said, all right, I want you to tell everybody in the room, give us the mechanism for evolution. And you can see, I mean, literally the dude just turns pale. And he stammers and he stammers and he stammers and finally, after me putting him on the spot and not letting him off the hook, he finally starts hollering out, well, all you got to have is time, chance, mutations, and natural selection. I said, okay, are you sure? He said, absolutely. So I grabbed the mic back. I said, we're going to look at all four of those. Number one, time. Does time work for or against evolution? Against, because time says everything should be going towards disorder. Evolution is actually going from amoeba to man. You're getting more complex. Time doesn't work. What about chance? Well, let's see. If I roll two dice, there's a chance that they're both going to be sixes, right? Does chance itself actually affect the dice? Folks, chance is just a word. Chance doesn't have any mechanism to change those dice. Chance doesn't do anything. Mutations, number three. I offered the guy something that I've offered all over the world, literally. I said, I'll pay you $1,000 if you can name me right now 12 beneficial mutations. 12 beneficial mutations. And by that I mean 12 mutations in the human gene pool that have helped us. You know, the greatest number I've ever gotten, and folks, I've been on university campuses, the greatest number I've ever gotten is 4. And that's with me giving them sickle cell, which is not exactly a positive mutation if you think about the fact that it can kill you. So, if scientists can't come up with a bunch of good mutations, we know mostly all mutations are bad. 97% will either kill you or hurt the creature. There's about 2.5 to almost 3% that are neutral, meaning they don't affect it one way or the other. Then you've got a very scant few that we would consider good. How many positive mutations does it take to go from a fish to a bird? I'll tell you this, we don't have enough. You can add a gazillion, billion, trillion, zillion years, and you're not going to get enough good mutations to go from a fish to a bird. That only left natural selection. And I smiled at the guy and said, you know who actually came up with natural selection? Charles Darwin! No, actually it was Edward Blythe, a creationist. I said, we don't have a problem with natural selection. Natural selection, the idea of survival of the fittest. Guys, the survival of the fittest explain the arrival of the fittest? No. He didn't like my answer. Let's see. If we take our kids out of school and put them in private and home schools, is that not going to make public schools worse? Should parents and grandparents fight for God in those schools, like on the school boards, etc.? Okay, you asked, so I'm going to answer. My wife and I view our role, our primary mission field is our kids. Our job is to get them to heaven. Period. Now, everything else comes after that. So, if my job is to get my kids to heaven, and I know for sure that there is a big, huge, ugly, pink elephant problem in the school system, should I send my kids, who I want to get to heaven, to try to fix that problem? Or should I make sure that my kids have the full armor of God on before I send them out to battle? See, folks, I'm afraid we're sending our kids out to battle, and they're not ready for it. You know, if I told everybody in this room that you can send your child to this special room, and if your child makes it, they're going to end up earning over $1 million in their lifetime. We'd be tempted to send them to that special room. But if I also told you, by the way, that special room, there's an 85% chance they're going to lose their life in that special room. But they could make $1 million. Would anybody in this room send your child there? You don't know what that special room is called? It's called colleges and universities. 85% of our kids are losing their souls there. So, looking at that question again, do I think it's important? Yeah. If you're in a situation, and please understand, it's different all over the place. I go to big cities, there's not a chance you get my child in a big city school. But I also go to some rural communities where the community actually still runs the school. Now that's a different scenario. Do I think that we need to stand up? Absolutely. We talked last night about the fact that we own the schools. We need to be on the school board. We need to be on the textbook committees. But if it's still going to be Babylon, I'm not going to send my kid there. Have you seen any effective ways for parents or students to fight this in our... that was from last night, I think. Let's see. I think I may have mixed a few of these up. What do you think about these people who say there's no God that exists, but yet you can see God's handiwork in all the earth, and we know the Bible and all these things are not just some coincidence? Yeah, I mean, obviously, the best evidence for God, we talked last night a little bit about how we prove there's a God. The best evidence is outside the doors. Just walk outside. In fact, I'll tell you what, I challenged my kids one time. We live in a neighborhood, and we've got areas where they can play, football field kind of areas. I said, take about a 3-foot square and look at everything that's in that 3-foot square. Insects, all the plants, the dirt, everything. You know how many things are in a 3-foot square? That's a bunch. Now, let's try to figure out, that's just 3 feet. Let's look at the earth. How did all this stuff get here? When you start looking at pollination, when you start looking at all the different aspects of complexity, life, it's God, period. What are the dinosaur references you mentioned in Psalm and Isaiah? I'm not sure who asked me this. If you'll find me, I will either give those to you tonight or I'll bring them to you in the morning. I don't know that I've got them right off the top of my head. Evolutionists can convince themselves to believe that animals could evolve to survive changes in the world. Then why are we so worried about global warming? Why? I love it. Why can't they convince themselves that polar bears and penguins will simply evolve? After all, they try to tell us we're still evolving. It's great logic. I mean, you think about it for just a moment, survival of the fittest. If they can. Now, most of them today would say that mankind has evolved intelligence to the point where we're able to get around evolution. But this is the same group of people that told us when I was little that we were losing our little toe because we didn't need it. You know, craziest thing, we just had my 4th child is 3 years old. He came out with 5 toes on both feet. How do we know? How do we know they're still here? Maybe we can. Okay, is this one about dinosaurs? Whoever wrote it? That's what I'm going to assume. It says, how do we know that they're not still here? Maybe we can't see them. It's a good point. It's a big earth. It's a big, deep ocean. Is it possible that there are creatures out there? Yeah, there have been reports, especially like the Makiki Mumbo down, I think, in Africa, where you've had several folks who have reported the same creature. Lots and lots of things that have been discovered even just in the last few months. I'll share a thing with you. I don't have a picture of it quickly that I can get to. I've got a picture of it. Japanese trawler hooked something, pulled it up, looks dead up like a plesiosaur. I mean, dead up like a plesiosaur. It was dead. It was rotting. So here's this Japanese fishing boat that is full of fish that has to make a choice. Do we want to keep this thing or the fish? Well, they made a very, 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 very dumb decision. They took some pictures of it, cut the line, dropped it off because they didn't want it to contaminate their fish. Not realizing that plesiosaur would have been worth a whole lot more than those fish. So do I think that there's stuff out there? Absolutely. How do people spread out during the Ice Age survive during the flood? Capengia. Okay, let's stop right there. I want to do a real quick test with you. How many of the kids in here have sung songs about the flood? Like, who built the ark? Who built the ark? You guys, okay? Or the little ark. You guys sing those songs for me? Yes? Okay, moms and dads, listen to me. And I'm not trying to be ugly. I think we have sanitized the flood to our kids' detriment. And by that I mean, we've got the little toys, we got the books, and it's our kids' favorite. You realize this was the deadliest event that's ever hit this earth. Have you thought about the fact that when bodies drown, what they do is they go down for several hours, they float for several days, if not weeks. Can you imagine the stench that hit Noah and his family as all the animals on the planet and all the human... This was the worst disaster that's ever hit this earth, and we've sanitized it. How did they live? You got 8 people. 8 people on a boat. You ever thought about Noah's neighbor? Noah's neighbor who saw him building the boat every single day. And yet, you know what? That's right. They didn't get on the boat, did they? Or what about Noah's best friend? Did Noah's best friend get on the boat? Maybe what Noah did, maybe Noah took a gun and a rope and said, "You're coming on the boat." No. It's not the way it happened. 2 Peter chapter 2, we find out he was a preacher of righteousness for about 100 years. He preached and he preached and he preached and he built and he built and he built. Point number 1, there's a big difference between being convinced of a God and being convicted. If Noah had just been convinced, he would have never picked up a hammer. Church, listen to me. We got a lot of people who are convinced that God exists, but they are not convicted. We got a lot of people who will not pick up a hammer. Noah picked up a hammer. Saved himself, saved his wife. Shem, Ham, Japheth, wife. And that's it. In fact, if you look at the text, Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, it gives you the month and the day. You know why? If I say the words 9/11 to you, you know what happened then? Folks, listen to me. This was the day. This was a day like never, ever before. And I don't think we get it. And I think we need to start getting back in the pulpit and we need to start reminding people about the wrath of God. Because, church, you can't appreciate the love and the grace unless you get the wrath. Yes, sir?
Is radiocarbon dating reliable?
Great question. What about radiocarbon dating? Let's go. Let me sneak forward just a second, right? Let's see. On the screen, you see 7 assumptions that all have to be correct for radiocarbon dating to be correct. I can show you 3 of them that we have problems with. Let me share with you one easy way to look at it to kind of help you understand why this is a problem. If everybody in this room is suddenly fossilized, we're covered over, we're dead. Same thing happens to a group by Mount St. Helens, and the same thing happens to a group in Japan. All the same night, all covered, all dead. Exactly. if they come back and say 4,000 years, they dig us up, they date us. We should date exactly the same, right? Because we died the same night, living as contemporaries. And yet, the people by Mount St. Helens, they're going to date differently because they've been eating plants and animals that were exposed to radioactivity when the volcano went off. You think there's been any radioactivity in Japan lately? Okay, now let's look at this from a scientific perspective for just a moment. Let me back up. How does it work? I'm gonna leave that up there. I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna give it to you in an easier form. Oops. So let's suppose we find a bone. We measure how much radioactive carbon that bone's got in it. We're going to say for ease of measure we got 10 units. So you guys don't want to leave anywhere right now. It's important. So we got a bone that's got 10 radioactive units in it. I've got 20 in me. Now the way this dating thing works is, allegedly when you die, you start automatically losing at a steady rate the amount of radioactive carbon in your bones. Allegedly, the half-life of carbon is 5,730 years, which means if I die today, in 5,730 years I should have half the amount of radioactive carbon that I have right now. So we find a bone that's got 10, I've got 20. How old should that bone be? It's lost half, 5,730 years. Two problems. Number one, does anybody live 5,730 years? No. Number two, if I show you a dinosaur bone and it's got 10 radioactive units in it, what do I compare that to? Do we have any living walking around dinosaurs that know how much? So maybe the living one should have 17 or 1,700 or 7 or 0.7. We don't know. So how in the world can you hold up a dinosaur bone and tell me radioactively this is so many years old when we don't have a living standard to measure it to? So bottom line on your question, here's some errors that have actually been peer-reviewed. Living mollusk, dated by carbon-14, dated as being 3,000 years old. Keyword there being a living mollusk. Freshly killed seals dated at 1,300 years. Mummified seals that are dead 30 years have given ages as high as 4,600. Muscle tissue from beneath an ox was dated at 24,000 years old. Hair from the hind of the same animal dated as 7,200 years old. Must have had a toupee. Wood taken from actively growing trees, dated as carbon-14 by being 10,000 years old, again actively growing. Border from an Oxford castle in England. They knew it was built 785 years prior. It was dated as 7,370 years old. So did I put a whole lot of stock in it? No. Any more comments, questions? Yes, sir?
Would you mind commenting on the find of the frozen woolly mammoths?
Yeah, what about the frozen woolly mammoths? Are they real? Yep. Were they snap frozen? Yep. How? Talked to a guy by the name of Michael Ord. He is a weather specialist. And he shared with me that when you picture the woolly mammoths, you think, this massive, quick freezing of ice. He said it was very quick freezing, but he said it was actually from wind. He said post-flood, you've got a new environment. Everything, top and bottom, is now in an ice age. He said you've got animals that are moving around being distributed, and when the new weather patterns and new jet streams start, you've got animals that are out grazing on buttercups and different flowers that all of a sudden, within just a relatively short amount of time, find themselves in a polar ice stream or jet stream, and they were frozen, quite literally standing up eating. He said, we still cut them open and find their stuff inside. Very much suggestive of a flood environment. Good question. Yes?
As for the carbon dating, I've heard, and I'm wondering if it's true, if they say this fossil we've determined is 1,000 years old, so therefore this layer is 1,000. Everything in that layer we've determined is now 1,000. So it's
Yes. Circular reasoning. She said, they're dating the layers by the fossils and the fossils by the layer. If we find a dinosaur bone, right now in science, the current attitude is that bone has got to be at least 65 million years old. So guess what the layer of dirt gets labeled as? 65 million years old. Guess what then any other fossil in that layer gets labeled as? 65 million years old. We're dating the layers by the fossils and the fossil by the layer. Circular reasoning. And there's lots of good examples. I got a whole PowerPoint show of out-of-place artifacts. That's a fun one. Because you got all this stuff that shouldn't be there.
You always talk about how the Grand Canyon was developed by the Colorado River.
Yes.
It just fascinates me. Look at the Colorado River and look at the Grand Canyon.
Okay. Are you going to be here tomorrow?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It said, it's talking about the Grand Canyon, the Colorado River forming which is which. I got to show you at least one slide from it. For those of y'all who are going to be here tomorrow, you're getting a preview. Let's see. One of the things that you know, textbooks, they love saying, over millions of years, the Colorado River carved out the Grand Canyon from solid rock. And we bought it. I mean, most of us, that's kind of what we mentally think. One of the things, well, I'm going to show you a couple of ways that's not true tomorrow. But, let's see. Let me get rid of some of my windows here. Here we go. All right, so this is what our kids see in their textbooks. Colorado River cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. Here's what they don't tell our kids. Water enters the canyon at an elevation of 2,800 feet. South Rim at an elevation of 6,900 feet. You know what that means water would have to do to cut that canyon? It'd have to go uphill 4,000 feet. Water doesn't do that. You had a question? Yes, ma'am. What do I think about microevolution? Great question, and I'm going to put another picture up here real quick. I actually showed this one to the young people today. Let's see. So, here's a picture. Actually grabbed it from a textbook. Basically making the argument of dog evolution. So, once it finally loads, you're going to see an ancestral dog at the top, and it's got all these other different kind of little dogs throughout. And the concept is we can take a dog, breed it, make all these different, and that's true. Microevolution is true, absolutely. We can make different kind of pea plants, we can crossbreed things, but here's the problem. Microevolution is changes within limited parameters. When you breed two dogs, what do you still get? You get a dog. You don't get a fern or a rhinoceros or giraffe. You still get dogs. So they show our kids this truth. And then they try to slip in on the backside macroevolution. Something we've never ever seen to be true. I'm going to show you a quote just because I love it. It says, micromutations do occur, but the theory that these alone can account for evolutionary change is either falsified or else it's unfalsifiable, hence metaphysical theory. I suppose nobody will deny it's a great misfortune if an entire branch of science becomes addicted to a false theory. But this is what has happened in biology. I believe that one day the Darwinian myth will be ranked the greatest deceit in the history of science. When this happens, many people oppose the question, how did this ever happen? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When I was a young adult, I was tempted to try to marry biblical accounts to scientific account.
Yes.
Can you speak just to, there may be people in the audience that are struggling with that as well?
Yeah, actually, I got to meet with the teams today, and one of the things one of them asked me was, what about theistic evolution? The idea that God made it, but maybe it evolved over long periods of time. And we talked a little bit about what is, and we'll deal some of this tomorrow at the afternoon session. But we talked a little bit about the fact that Genesis 1, it gives very specific days. It says, you know, evening and morning were the first day, evening and morning were the second day. So he's defining a day as an evening and a morning, and then he gives a numerical adjective. But then look at verse 14 of chapter 1, where he gives you 3 elements of time. He says, for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years. So he's giving you seasons, days, years. Now, if God made everything and then he stepped back and let everything evolve, according to the Bible, all the plants were put here on what day? 3. Okay, they've got to have water. They've got to have the right nutrients. They've got to have sunlight. But plants also have to be pollinated, don't they? You know those little flying insects, bees? They serve a purpose, don't they? What day did all the flying creatures come into picture? So, are we really ready to say that God created all the green flowering plants on day 3 and we had to wait millions of years before they could be pollinated? It doesn't fit. Exodus chapter 20 verse 11 says very plainly, for in 6 days God created the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that in it is. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. Good question. Yes, sir.
Several years ago, I heard a report on Chernobyl.
Yes.
And how the mice had spent several generations faster than they should have been.
Yes.
How does that fit into this, and why is it even significant?
Okay. He's talking about over in Chernobyl where we had a radiation leak. You got mice that are basically experiencing a faster generation time. A couple of things to point out. Number 1, there was an outsider that manipulated the experiment, right? By that I mean, this wasn't something that the mice did on their own. You had outside help, be it through radiation of man. So that's point number 1. You got to have somebody toying with it. Point number 2, how does a faster generation time mean anything? It doesn't, aside from the fact that we in our bodies right now, it's called programmed cell death. It's one of the latest things that we've actually discovered in the human body. Basically, it says this. Cells undergo what they're supposed to do for a certain length of time, and then all of a sudden they've got a code that says, you know what? Time's up. And you got programmed cell death. Well, these particular rodents were mutated from the radiation. So am I surprised that their programmed cell death clock is messed up? No. Good question.
Yesterday you mentioned one college that you would recommend, or that
I wouldn't recommend any. I did actually have one of the young people come up and ask me. The only college that I know for certain that is not teaching organic evolution is Freed-Hardeman. Freed-Hardeman down in Tennessee. A lot of them, guys, a lot of them. I've got pictures. I was on campuses. I've got pictures of their tests. I've got pictures of their walls where they're, display cases, different things like that. And I've talked to several of their biology. I'll give you an example. Went to a Christian college. They had made a display case. And in their display case, they got a dinosaur claw that they put as being, 60, 70 million years old. So I emailed the biology chair. I said, hey, why are you guys teaching evolution? He said, we're not. So I sent him a picture that I'd taken in their lab of the evolutionary tree of life. So he types back, he says, oh, well, we're just teaching it as a theory. I said, okay, then maybe you can explain this. And so I sent him a picture of their display case that they had made up. And that's when he stopped talking to me. So do I recommend them? No.
I have a picture in a book of a fedora that's been fossilized.
Yeah, I've got it. Somewhere in one of the, yeah.
Do we really know what conditions? I mean, because we're kind of led to believe that it's a fossil because it's really old.
Hold on, let me see. I may actually have it open here. Let's see. Nope. He's talking about, he's got a picture of a fedora that, let me put this up there so you guys can see it. A hat that's been fossilized. And, you know, the bottom line is we got all kinds of cool artifacts that really shouldn't be. This is a hammer that's allegedly in rock that's 400 million years old. Well, hopefully I don't have to tell you that's a problem. Because according to evolutionists, we've only been here 3 to 5 million years. How do you get a hammer and a rock? Actually, let me show you a better one. I love this one. Alright. Again, it's raining. Y'all don't have any word. Tiny drops of water over millions of years. How many of you in here have seen stalactites or stalagmites? You know when you go splunking down in a cave, they say, don't touch it. It's taken a gazillion years and the oils from your finger are going to mess that up and blah, blah, blah. And yet, that's the Lincoln Memorial that was built in 1922. That is an Australian mine. You'll notice there are stalactites hanging from the switch sign. That's indoor plumbing that hadn't been here for millions of years. This is a cool one. This is Mother Shipton's Cave over in Yorkshire. You can actually go there. You can tie a teddy bear or a hat or a trinket, come back in 3 days, and it's been completely covered over just like a stalactite. This is a bat that was encased in a stalagmite. Now you got to ask yourself, did that bat just sit there while tiny drops of water hit him over millions of years? Or have we been sold a bad bill of goods? To me, the best example, if you ever get to Wyoming, there's a place called Teepee Fountain. Teepee Fountain was started in 1903. I was there last year. Teepee Fountain basically was a warm spring that was coming up. Somebody took a pipe and they stuck it right in the middle of it, and the water came up over the pipe. And you know how like mineral deposits will show up around your sink? Okay, well this particular Teepee Fountain was showing these mineral deposits, except it was a little bit bigger. That's since 1903. So do I put a whole lot of stock in their dating? Guys, when you really look at it, stuff is not nearly as old as they want us to think. You ask the question, why would they do it? Why would they do this? I think a lot of the professors, believe it or not, I think a lot of professors are just ignorant, not ignorant as in dumb, but ignorant to the facts, and they're just recycling what they were taught. And I think there is a group of people who have an agenda, who don't want to bend a knee. And basically, folks, these are people who have elevated themselves to the status of a god, and they don't want to humble themselves for anything. Tomorrow morning, we continue. The seminar continues. And I realize, some of y'all go other places, but since I don't know where you're supposed to be, y'all just come here. We start at 9?
10.
10 o'clock. 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll leave you with this little teaser. It's my wife's favorite lesson. And she says it's the one you learn the most Bible in, the most stuff in. If you can be here, please be here. 11 o'clock, we're going to talk about 7 reasons why we're losing our kids. It's an epidemic. It's a topic we need to discuss. 2 o'clock. Yep. 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, we're going to come back and we're going to discuss Mount St. Helens, the Grand Canyon, the age of the earth. We're going to look at some evidences, what we've actually learned from the evidence. We all know about the geologic column, but what does the evidence actually show? I'm going to point out a couple of things back there. Understand, I'm not here to sell. I don't make a dime off anything on the table. It all goes back into the company. 3 things. Number 1, these are free. Pick one up. The only thing we're asking for is if you got an email address, put it on there. It's a DVD called Faith for Life. Again, just grab it, take it with you. If you don't get this at your house, you need to repent tonight. This is a monthly magazine written by faithful Christians. It's called Think. It is current issues from a distinctly Christian perspective. Every single month we write on different topics, whether it's medicine in the Bible, whether it's Islam, whether it's forgiveness, whether it's dinosaurs, whatever. I'm a firm believer that we need to get rid of the bad stuff, but you got to replace it with something. $30 a year. I mean, basically if you can give up a cup of coffee every month. Last but not least, a lot of you have asked me if you could only buy one thing, this would be what it is. It's a book that I wrote about a year and a half ago. It's called Convicted. A Scientist Examines the Evidence for Christianity. It's 20 chapters long, and it covers up all kinds of topics. It's in color, for those of you who like pictures. If you know somebody that's going off to college, somebody you are studying with, somebody that might be interested in this information, this is what I would tell you to put in their hands. Because it is designed to show people the evidence for the truth. Thank you guys very, very much for your attention. I look forward to working with you tomorrow.